Hi, I'm Cheryl Casper. Welcome back to Opal Earth. I am an instructor of opal cutting and carving at the William Holland School of the Lapidary Arts in Georgia in the United States. In the last episode of Opal Earth, we started a new series on working with the Pixie. The Pixie is the machine that we use to cut opal, and there are some things that we can do in working with the Pixie to help it last longer and to be more safe with it. So last time we talked about how to dress a new wheel. This time we're going to talk about something kind of interesting to a lot of people, which is how to take the current wheel that we've got, if it's got some wear on it, and actually put additional grit onto this wheel that has worn bare spots on it so that we can use this longer. Now, I don't recommend this for machines that are pristine new because, you know, it might mess them up or whatever. But I've got my workhorse Pixie with me that I'm going to be working with today. So you can tell this is what a wheel looks like when it is ready to be used and it doesn't have any wear on it at all. But this one has wear spots on it. You can see those very easily. This is a very worn wheel. And this is an example of a wheel that has been treated, that I've treated with grit that I have bought separately and put on here. Now, why would we do this? Well, new wheels cost somewhere between, $70 and $90. And that's a lot of money if you're trying to cut a lot of stones. And on my workhorse machine here, I just go through wheels a lot. So I like to coat my own wheels. Now you can have them sent out and have other people coat them, and I'm not sure, it's probably around $50, $40 or $50. But you can do it yourself. Now you can use grit. You can use diamond grit like this that you can buy, the diamond powder grit. And it's maybe $20 on eBay or Amazon or something like that for the diamond or synthetic diamond that you can use. But that's also kind of pricey, but it's definitely better than $50 or $100. Or you can use something like silicon carbide that is much cheaper. So this was like 500 grams for maybe $10. Now it's not going to last as long. It's not going to do as good of a job as quickly, but if you're going through the wheels like crazy, why don't you try this method and see if you like it on your workhorse Pixie, not your brand new Pixie. You ready to get started? Let's give it a try. First, we're going to start with the materials that we're going to need. So let's take a look at those. So right here, I've got my silicon carbide that I'm going to use. And I've got some measuring cups right here that are measured, here in milliliters and things. I've got something to stir my epoxy. I'm going to use 330 epoxy. You can see here that the 330 epoxy is a two-part epoxy. And it hardens, I want to say, it starts to harden in about 20 minutes, but it will have the best effect after, 24 hours or so. So I don't plan to use this wheel for about 24 hours. Now, I've tried several other things. I've tried, the red and green glue and those kind of things, and they don't do as well. I've tried other epoxies like JB Weld, and it has a tendency to stay flexible, and I don't want that. I want this to harden down well. So that it will give me a little bit of resistance. Now, it's not going to make it so hard that I won't have the flexibility of the Nova wheel that's got the padding behind it, so that I can still push into that wheel a little bit and get that flexibility. But I really like the 330 epoxy for this purpose. Now, before you start anything with the epoxy, you know that epoxy is sticky. You should be warned that epoxy is sticky when it's wet and when it goes to dry. This is a messy process. So please make sure that you take care of your hands. If you have any allergic reaction to, epoxy at all, please do not do this process. But it might help for you to have a little bit of acetone by the side or some denatured alcohol. Don't do this if you have a brand new nail manicure, or if you've just had acrylic nails put on or something like that. This will mess up your hands. You can try to put gloves on. That's probably a good idea. Now, I'm going to end up with some extra. You probably don't want to end up with extra, but I'm going to show you in the next video what I do with that extra. I make my own bits. And that's fun. And this process of coating my wheel is actually how I learned to make my own bits in specific grits. Now, I make those bits to go into my micromotor carving unit at a 3/32 size so that it fits in the bit. Now, that's interesting, but you'll have to join me in that video to find out what that's about. But I'm going to use my leftovers for that. So you'll need to sort of judge for yourself based on how much we have left over. We'll need a tool with a flat edge, such as a knife or a dowel, whichever you prefer to use. And then we'll need a little stick to mix our epoxy with. So let's get started doing that. I'm going to use equal parts of these three items: my resin, my hardener, and my grit. So I'm going to use 1/2 of a teaspoon of each. Now I'm going to add my hardener, and I will put in 1/2 of a teaspoon of that. When I add together the hardener in there, it's important to make sure that they're equal, because if they're not, it won't harden correctly, and especially if you're making the small bits, they won't solidify. So, and they'll break off too easily. Now I've got 1/2 teaspoon of both the resin and the hardener. That leads to 1 teaspoon, and I'm going to go ahead and mix it before I add my grit. Now you'll need to get the feel of how much grit you need based on your altitude and the moisture in the air and all of those kinds of things. But the most important thing to remember is that you must have equal parts of the resin and the hardener. And then you have a little bit of flexibility in how much grit you add to that. But we want this to be about the consistency of peanut butter. And typically what I find is that 1/2 teaspoon of each together makes about the consistency of peanut butter. So I'm going to mix this very well for 2 minutes. Making sure I get around the edge of my cup here. After I've mixed for about 2 minutes, I'm now ready to add the grit. Good. It does have some air bubbles in it at this point, and those will go away as we start to work with the material with the grit included. So I'm going to pour my grit into my mixture. I'm going to set my grit bag out of the way so I don't spill it. And I'm going to mix the grit into the AB mix that we've already started. So now I should have what? About 1.5 teaspoons. Once that's well mixed, then I can start applying it to my wheel. Good. Now we've gotten just enough of our mixture over the whole wheel. And we can tell that there are still some high spots and low spots here, but they'll even out. The thinner your mixture, the more likely it is to smooth out on its own. Notice that I've put down a layer of grit. And simply roll your wheel on the surface of the grit. Now some of this will wash off, that is true, but I'm gently just trying to smooth out the surface of this wheel. You can see that that surface is now much smoother than it was before I rolled it on top of the grit on the table. I don't want to put so much grit on this wheel that it's not able to go underneath the surface as it rolls on the machine. So I need to be careful that it doesn't scrape as it hits the surface. Once you have a nice even application of the grit onto the surface of your wheel, you can simply lay the wheel down and let it dry. If your mixture is too thin, you'll notice it starting to gather down here at the bottom. You'll simply need to dress that with your agate stone when the wheel is dry, after about 24 hours. So thanks for joining us here on Opal Earth. But remember, we've got the rest of this material sitting here, and it's just almost perfect for us to use to make some bits. So I hope you'll join me in the next video, making our own bits out of grit and 330 epoxy. Thanks.